Hi, Jay Fallon here. Thanks for listening. Listen, we've just gone through a cyclone, just came through the area in the Whitsundays where I live. Cyclone Koji in the early hours of this morning. There's no damage other than a couple of minor branches from palm trees being pulled down. But it came through early hours of this morning. A bit of flooding, still a bit of gusty winds getting around, and some rain still. But everything's safe. Everything's good here. I wanted to look at this shooting that happened in Minnesota. A friend of mine, their daughter asked me my thoughts on the Minnesota shooting, and when I was looking at it, I thought, wow, there's a lot to see. The videos, it's it's sad. It is sad. So I just want to look at this tragic shooting in Minnesota. It involves ICE officers and a woman who was killed during an attempted arrest. This incident has sparked outrage on both sides of the political aisle in America. Uh, Outrage, confusion, a lot of misinformation. But so instead of reacting emotionally or politically, I'm in Australia anyway, so I can't really react politically, I suppose. I want to walk through this from a policing perspective, the way officers are trained to analyze these situations. I want to break down the tactics that are used, the threat assessment, and also look at the legal standards that govern the use of force. So I'm going to use some footage or video that's taken out of Nate, the lawyer, and he breaks down in his footage, in his video, he breaks down two pieces of legislation that we need to remember, and that's one of them is Graham versus Connor, and the other one is Tennessee versus Garner. And so the goal is, my goal is not to defend or condemn, but maybe just to bring another point of view, another perspective, a bit more clarity, maybe truth, discernment. Let's check out the video, and we're going to be, like I said, listening to some of the voiceover that you hear is this Nate, the lawyer, and he's going to be running through the legal defense or the legal arguments, the legal standards over there in the United States, and what police, law enforcement officers have to remember. And then we're going to go through the video footage, all the video footage that's been released of this shooting.
Got my eyes straight ahead, got my head in the game. With the red light on, I'm just waiting for the change. Get my head down low.
But around the country.
All right, so now we know why she was there, to prevent ICE from arresting people who may be here illegally. So she was preventing their law enforcement activity. She was using her car to block their path, and something horrible happened. So first, as always, we'll start with the law. So you know what you're looking for when you see the evidence. And then we'll look at the evidence, and you are going to apply the law to the evidence so you can come to your conclusion at the end. So without any further ado, here's the law. There are two cases that we have to consider. Tennessee v. Garner from 1985 and Graham v. Conner from 1989. These two cases direct how officers are going to be judged if they use deadly physical force against the subject. So we're going to start with the case Tennessee v. Garner. Now, in that particular case, police shot a fleeing felon in the back. They witnessed the person committing a felony. The person started running away, and they shot and killed the person. And in Tennessee, it was legal to shoot fleeing felons in the back. But the Supreme Court said, no, that's actually not constitutional. And the Supreme Court said, unless the person is a serious threat to the officer or other members in the community, then you can't just shoot them in the back or essentially commit executions on the street because the person's running away from you. And as you can see from the Justice Department's own website, it's called the fleeing felon rule. Next, we move to the case of Graham v. Conner in 1989. Now, in that case, if police are using force, that force is going to be judged by what the court says is known as the objectively reasonable standard. The objectively reasonable standard is an objective standard used to judge an officer's actions. Under the standard, a particular application of force must be judged through the perspective of a reasonable officer facing the same set of circumstances without the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, and be based upon the totality of the facts that are known to that officer at the time the force was used. Now, under the objectively reasonable test for Graham v. Conner, the court gives us three factors that we should consider. Now, these aren't exclusive. There are many, many other factors that you can consider, but these are three the court points to in the case. One, the nature of the 911 call. Bank robbery, more likely you're going to use force versus cat stuck in a tree. Then you have whether the suspect is resisting arrest. more likely that you're going to be using force. And then last but not least, this is from Tennessee v. Garner. Remember, if the suspect is a serious threat to other officers or members of the community, then it would be objectively reasonable to use force to stop that threat. So now you know the law, and you're going to apply the law to the facts of this particular case. So let's look at the facts.
In this footage taken by a bystander just before the shooting, we can see Good's maroon SUV partially blocking the street. Good's partner, seen here outside the car, and ICE officer Jonathan Ross are filming each other. You can see Good in the driver's seat.
Now, one thing, this ICE officer is walking around. He's holding the phone up in the other lady's face. They're walking around filming each other. Why on earth don't ICE officers have a camera like what we have in Australia? And I've seen other officers in America as well. They have a camera attached to their vest that's filming. Because one bad tactical thing about this is one of his hands are tied up holding the camera, and he's also having to divert his eyesight to the phone at all times just to make sure that he's filming the right thing. So, and that's probably more of a what kind of materials they're given to work with, I suppose. But
blocking the street.
I don't think it's a good
Good's
thing.
partner, seen here outside the car, and ICE officer Jonathan Ross are filming each other.
He's walking around. One of his hands are held up like that.
You can see Good in the driver's seat, waving cars by while Ross begins walking around her SUV. Two more federal officers arrive in this gray truck and approach Good's vehicle while simultaneously speaking to her.
So, law enforcement officers with lights and sirens and in full uniform are ordering a motorist who's blocking traffic to get out of their vehicle.
No! No! Shit!
The whole encounter, from the moment an officer told Good to get out of her car to the third shot, lasted just 7 seconds.
So now quickly, let's just break down what we just saw.
With the video slowed down, you can see one officer grabs the door handle as Good begins backing up the car. Officer Ross can now be seen filming with his left hand at the front of the car. You can see the front wheel spin forward and Ross draws his gun with his right hand.
So now I want to point you to the front tire and where it's at. The officer's in front of the car and the tire is pointing at the officer. So now if you hit the accelerator, you're going to run right into the officer. And as you can see, the person in the car is hitting the accelerator. That's why the tires are spinning. As you can see, the officer has his gun out. The tires are still pointed directly at the officer and the car is moving forward. Now, at the last second, the tires turn away from the officer, but the officer is struck by the vehicle, which you cannot see from this angle. Now, here's a second angle from the front of the vehicle. So you can clearly see the officer is actually hit by the car.
Well, the slowdown version is showing me that when the SUV pulls forward, they make contact with the agent in the street, and then immediately following that contact, you hear 3 gunshots follow.
So as CNN's expert has shown us, the officer was being struck by the vehicle and returned fire while the vehicle was literally hitting him. Here it is in real time. So next, the officer was recording this incident on a cell phone. So now let's look at the incident from the officer's perspective.
Like I said, it really blows my mind that he hasn't got a camera that's attached to his vest and that he's walking around holding his phone with one hand. And once you do that, well, then your view is diverted. Okay, for me, when I was in the police, okay, I would be very dubious about walking in front of a vehicle like that if you've got someone who's being antagonistic, who's obviously not obeying your instructions, and then you go and walk in front of the vehicle. But anyway, let's keep going.
That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you. Show your face. I'm not mad at you. That's okay. We don't change our plates every morning, just so you know.
Okay, so he got a view of the plate, so he knows exactly what the vehicle, he'll be able to look up exactly who the vehicle's registered to and what their home address is, and he'll be able to look up all those details, okay? Remember that.
It'll be the same plate when you come talk to us later. That's fine. U.S. citizen, former. You want to come at us? You want to come at us?
Okay, so and then you see there that he's also gotten some footage of the other. I think it's the wife. They're two women, so he's got footage of the other wife's face as well. So he'll be able to run facial recognition through there and confirm identifications because he's got the registration. He'll be able to confirm everyone's identity through that.
I said go get yourself
Now
some
he's
lunch,
walked
big boy.
around. He's walking around the whole car.
Get out of the
The other officers, okay, now here, this one's getting in there. The other officers are coming from the other direction and going towards the driver's side of the vehicle, and then he's continued to walk around and positioned himself. This is the ICE officer, positioned himself in front of the vehicle, which, in my mind, is not a sound tactical move. It's no, things are escalating. Anyway, I just don't think it's a good tactical move.
Get out of the car. Whoa!
So now here, the wife is antagonizing the officer, asking him essentially, what are you going to do?
I said go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Go ahead.
Out of the car.
So now they realize that ICE is about to arrest them for interfering in federal law enforcement activities. And the wife, who's standing outside filming, tries to jump back in the car.
Get out of the car.
So now what you're going to hear a lot in the media is that the officer placed himself in front of the car. But as you can see, that's not accurate because while the officer was standing still, the car actually repositioned itself and pointed the front of the car directly at the officer. Now,
Well, he was still moving around, and yeah, he did. She did position herself there, but this is what I mean. If he's so busy holding the phone and filming everything, rather than just thinking, "Well, I need to be moving out," and not allowing myself to be placed in front of the vehicle. And okay, technically, he mightn't have positioned himself in front, but she's reversed back. He can see she's reversed back, and he's now in front of the vehicle. So I still think you can't just wipe out any kind of burden from the officer and say, well, no, he hasn't placed himself there.
as the officer was trying to move toward the driver's side of the vehicle to get from in front of the car, the person hits the gas, striking the officer.
Whoa!
Now, simultaneously, while being struck by the car, the officer lets off 3 successive shots.
Whoa!
So now that you know the facts, now that you know the law, let's bring everything together so you can decide if this officer is justified or not. If we apply the Graham standards to the case at hand, was it now one call? Blocking traffic. Pretty light, right? Was the person resisting arrest? Yeah, the officers were trying to open up the car door to arrest her or detain her, and she resisted. She didn't stop the car and get out and talk to the officers. She was actively resisting. And then last, was she a serious threat to the officers or other members of the community? Well, to the officer standing in front of the car, the government's saying she was a serious threat. She hit the officer with the car. Where if you're on the other side of it, you're saying she wasn't a serious threat because she was trying to run away. The argument here is that this woman's case is more like Tennessee v. Garner. The police essentially shot a fleeing felon. And the government is saying, no, she was a serious threat to that officer and he responded with deadly physical force. Now, if you're on a jury, you're going to have to ask yourself, was that officer standing in front of the vehicle, was that a serious threat to that officer? When she hit the gas, car's going forward, and the officer's hit by the vehicle. And remember, the officer's shooting as the car is hitting him, so it's happening all at the same time. Split second. Now, this is where the media spin comes in, because on the left side of the political aisle, they're only showing you one video, this one.
Now, Glenn, that's one angle. There are obviously other angles that are floating around the internet right now, but I think all of them generally show roughly the same thing, which is that there is an ICE agent right at the corner of the vehicle, that the person in the vehicle was attempting to turn the wheel so that they could flee the scene, and of course the ICE agent used that as the opportunity to shoot and ultimately kill the person who was in the vehicle.
Now, just to show you how deceptive that was, he knows there are other angles. He knows there are other videos, and he says that none of them are going to make a difference. But obviously, he's totally lying, because I think this video makes a big difference in the way you analyze what happened. So now you know the law, you know the facts, and it's going to be up to people like you to determine if this officer is going to go to jail for murder or some type of homicide charge, or if this was a justified shooting because his life was in danger. Was he being reasonable, or was this criminal? I'll see you in the comments section. My name is Nate the Lawyer. I'm out. Peace.
Okay, so that Nate the lawyer goes on later on. I watched another video, him saying that he thinks it'll be very hard for any jury to find the officer guilty. Now, like I said, I wanted to be thinking about the tactics that we use and the actual threat assessment. You look at what we see in the video. The ICE agent's gotten out of his vehicle. He's got a phone, so one of his hand is now using that phone. His eyesight gets diverted constantly towards his phone because he's got to check out what he's actually filming. He's walked around a couple of times. He's actually put himself in harm's way because he's walked behind the vehicle. He's walked in front of the vehicle. Then you actually see the other agents come over. Everything's escalated. And I'm sorry, this is just the way I look at it. Everything's escalated because the other officers come over and immediately they're grabbing the car. You can see that this car wants to take off. The other lady gets in the passenger side. The other officer is now positioned in front of the vehicle because she's reversed back and positioned him in front. I'll tell you one thing I learned, and it always stuck with me when I was in the police, is that you're not going to stop a vehicle. The whole reason why we were taught in QPS anyway that you don't shoot into a moving vehicle is because it's very, very unlikely that you're going to stop the vehicle from moving. Even if you shoot the person and dies instantly, the person may slump forward, their foot may push down the accelerator and cause more harm. Secondly, you'll have bullets that have the potential to go through and through the vehicle and strike someone else. Looking at that video, this is just my opinion, not to throw the ICE agent under the bus too much, but I don't like the fact that, the vehicle maneuvers back and has him in line. He's still busy filming, which I suppose he had to do because for some reason they haven't got a camera attached to their vest. But then you can see him, he realizes the vehicle is about to take off and you can see him go for his gun. Instead of just diving out of the way or instead of walking out of the way, as soon as she's reversed back, he should have walked straight out of the way. He's pulling his gun. Shooting the person is not going to stop that vehicle from moving immediately. And you can't control where those bullets are going to go. They might hit something, ricochet, and hit someone. You've got quite a number of people standing around, other officers. In my mind, you're putting their lives at danger. So I think it's a tactical error. It was a tactical error for him to put himself in danger a number of times by getting behind the vehicle and in front of the vehicle. I also think that once he's there, he's made it clear that he wants to talk to these people. They are resisting. Once he's walked around and he's identified the vehicle, he's got the registration, he's got a good, clear video picture of the other female there. So he'll be able to identify these people, where they live, what their address is. They are breaking the law by not listening to their by resisting and by not doing what the ICE agent's instructions, by not following their instructions, they would be able to issue an arrest warrant for those two females. In my mind, this is the better way to go. It's always better to go ahead, let someone get away, in my perspective, and then fight another day. You've gone around, you've checked out the vehicle, you know the vehicle, the make and the model, you've got the registration, you've got footage of them, you can confirm the identification of everyone. And what I would have done, just me personally, is I'd be out of the way. As soon as they're taking off, everyone jumps out of the way. They're not going to stop for you. It's no use trying to you saw one person there, the other female ICE officer, they've grabbed the door and trying to lunge at it, and they're still holding on while the vehicle's trying to take off. I would be making everyone, everyone's got to let go, let the vehicle take off. You go and get yourself an arrest warrant after you've done the rest of your work. And then about what's the very earliest, say, I think, in Queensland, the earliest I think you can go and execute a warrant is 6 a.m, something like that. I would be there at their place at 6 a.m. and waking them up in their pajamas and putting handcuffs on them and arresting them the next morning. That way, you're really making more of a point, and it's more tactical. Saying this is what we're doing. I was always more in favor of gathering as much information as you can. You need intel. Intel is key for everything you're doing in these kinds of situations. Always taking a step back when everything's escalating. These two individuals were highly agitated. They think they have the moral high ground, so you try and de-escalate. You let them have their little win, let them go on their way. They've blocked their way, they've agitated the situation. Okay, you have your little win. Next morning, you rock up at their house at 6 o'clock in the morning, break down the door if you have to, arrest everyone while they're in their pajamas, and put them in the cell, all dressed in their pajamas still. That's what I would have done. But that's just me. Look, there was no. To me, I look at it, and there didn't seem to be a lot of a unified command. Uh, so he was out, he was filming. They were hurling a few insults. The ladies were hurling insults at him. He didn't seem to be saying a lot. And then multiple officers get out and they're shouting different things. It increases the panic and it reduces the compliance. People are way less likely to comply because you've got all these all these verbal instructions being hurled at you, and everything increases. All the panic increases. The escalation. This kind of approach, in my mind, it seemed rushed. And I get ICE is not a patrol agency. It's not a policing police officer agency where police officers probably deal a lot more with vehicles, people still situated in vehicles, and they can see the dangers. So maybe these ICE officers lack the repetition and the muscle memory that local law enforcement officers, police officers develop because you're pulling over thousands of vehicles for stops to check out vehicles, and you'll see, you'll come and a police officer might pull over a vehicle. They pull their vehicle over and they pull it over in a way that they can put themselves between. They'll use their vehicle as a place of safety, so that the other person can't ram them. You never put yourself in danger. So one of the other key questions here is the moment of the shooting. Was the vehicle being used as a weapon at the moment that shots were fired? And that's where the law is going to come into it. So obviously, Nate, the lawyer, went through those two legal frameworks there with Graham versus Connor and Tennessee versus Garner over there in America. So Graham versus Connor is that reasonableness. So what the Supreme Court held, excessive force claims must be judged under the Fourth Amendment using an objective reasonableness standard, meaning would another reasonable officer with the same information make the same decision? I think a lot of it may come back to training, and obviously these ICE officers have different directives, different trainings. They've got different objectives than a police officer. I believe a police officer in that same area would treat that situation completely differently because they are working with vehicle stops a lot more often. And as Nate the lawyer said, with the Graham factors, officers must be judged based on the severity of the crime, whether the suspect poses an immediate threat, and whether the suspect is resisting or attempting to flee. And yet they were attempting to flee. However, if everyone had have stood back and let them go, you can live to fight another day. Like I said, you've got the vehicle details. You've identified the vehicle. You can identify the driver and the other person. You can easily identify where they live, execute a warrant at a later date. When you're applying all this, those two different laws, those precedents, the Tennessee versus Gardner and Graham versus Connor, applying that law to the Minnesota shooting, you've got to ask yourself, what did the officers reasonably perceive under Graham versus Connor? What did the officers reasonably perceive? Was the vehicle moving towards them? Yeah, it was moving towards them. That's what it looked like. And were they in a position of danger? That officer was in a position of danger. The vehicle obviously maneuvered around and placed him in that position of danger. But he was already he was around towards the front. The vehicles moved, and then he stayed in that position until he's realised. And I think he was so distracted because he's filming on the phone that he hasn't realised till that last second that, oh rubbish, I'm in harm's way here. I need to move out of the way. And that's why I say if he had have had a camera and he hadn't have been so focused on holding his phone and filming, he would have been able to think more clearly, objectively. Well, I'm now in harm's way. The vehicle's maneuvered around here. I need to move around there. And then you've got to look at, did the suspect's actions create an immediate threat? It probably did in a lot of ways. And then under that Tennessee versus Garner, you've got to ask, did the suspect pose a significant threat of death or serious injury? Quite possibly. Was deadly force necessary to stop that threat? This is where, from my perspective, I think it's very hard to justify shooting inside a vehicle. As I said, you are not necessarily, there's no guarantee you're going to stop a vehicle from moving because you shot someone. You shoot them and you injure the person. It's very likely they're just going to put their foot down on the accelerator and keep flying through and maybe injure someone else. How quickly are you going to be able to shoot them and kill them and they immediately take their foot off the accelerator, or are you just exacerbating a situation and causing more of a heightening the threat more for other people? And then you've got to look at, did officers create the danger by poor positioning? Unfortunately, I think if I was looking at this in Australia, I'd be saying, well, the officer in my mind did actually create part of that danger by poor positioning, by being distracted on the phone. So this is where police experience is invaluable. The officers appeared to have boxed the vehicle in poorly. They approached too close. This was reducing their reaction time. They created crossfire risks. As I said, where he's shooting, there were other officers around the vehicle. So in my mind, it's very lucky that no one else was actually hit by a bullet. The commands were very chaotic. The suspect may have panicked due to the aggressive approach. I think these are training failures and not legal justifications. That's my opinion. And as I keep saying, it's always better to get the information, get as much intel as you can, and then come back when the odds are more on your side. Come back and raid their house at 6 a.m. with 20 officers and arrest them while they're in their pajamas. The sad part to all this, obviously, is that a woman's lost her life. These ICE officers are going to carry this forever. Those women, I'm not on the side of these women. Like I don't agree with what they were doing. I think they should have listened to the officers. I think they should have moved on. I don't agree with them getting in the way, and preventing ICE officers from doing their job. I don't believe that what they're doing, what the females were doing, I don't think it's morally right. I don't think it's ethically right. I believe they've got an issue with illegal immigrants over there, and some very dangerous illegal immigrants over there. And then you've got people like these ladies placing themselves in danger. Now, getting back to some other things from a policing point of view. If I was in Australia, I think you'd be far less likely to be shot. Now, if that was me in America, just from what I've seen of American police and even in some other countries, I think, well, you're far more likely to have lethal force used against you. Seeing how the officer there, the ICE officer, pulled his gun out fairly quickly, rather than thinking, well, I've got to jump out of the way, I can maneuver out of the way. He had the gun pulled out and he's shooting as he's driving back, and he got struck, and it was very, very sad. But he did pull the gun out and shoot at the same time, so it didn't really prevent the vehicle from moving. It's just it killed her in the end. But the lady's lost her life. I don't think the officer's actions are going to be scrutinised, highly scrutinised. He's going to have to live with this forever anyway. I think it's going to be very hard if you're looking at this from the American legal perspective, I think it's going to be very hard to get a conviction against him. but I think there's quite a few failures in the complete response by all those ICE officers, ICE agents, and it probably shows maybe a lack of training within that group of people that we saw there, and people who are, and I've noticed the same thing with Australian police officers. There seems to be this willingness to just escalate and not step back and give people a place to breathe. You look at, you think about it, you pull up at a job and you've got a couple of, you know, mouthy middle-aged females who are very agitated. They feel like they've got the high moral ground. They're trying to get their point across. You step back. This is just what I'm thinking. You step back. You let them mouth off. You interact with them. You lay down the law. This is my instructions. This is what I need you to do. Other people come. You have them. Now, let's all step back. Let's give them some room. This is what's going to happen. You're going to be arrested. Everyone stays out of the way. If they want to go and take off, well, then they take off, and then you go and arrest them at a later date. Rather than this need, like I said, I see this happening in Australia too. This need to escalate, constantly escalate, to force. No, this is what I've said, and you have to do what I say. There's more than one way to skin a cat, you know. Yeah, instead of just saying, well, you have to do it right now. You come back later. It's as a Christian, we're always called to pursue truth and justice, compassion, not tribalism. So I think we can acknowledge the tragedy, the failures on both sides of it. These ladies who thought that they could come there, they could step inside a law enforcement, step up against the law enforcement, and they didn't have the common sense to think maybe they put themselves in this way. As soon as the officers started giving them instructions, they should have stepped out. They should have got out of the car and did what they were instructed to do. So I believe it's their fault because they've escalated it and they've put themselves in danger, and they've instigated this whole scenario. However, there's also blame on the other side as well. So we need to look at the tragedy, we need to look at the failures, we need to look at accountability. I tend to just look at the accountability from a police officer's side because I tend to have a look at how I would do it, how I think from a police perspective you should be doing it. But I think at the end of it all, the case, it reminds us that policing is complex, it's dangerous, and it's deeply human. Mistakes in tactics lead to tragedies, and poor training. Because I look at this and I think I don't think there's been enough training in how to handle these kind of situations and how to de-escalate. So poor training leads to tragedies, and panic leads to tragedies. Understanding the law, got that Graham and Gardner helps us cut through the noise and see the real issues. And if we want fewer of these incidents, we need, in Western society, you need better training, you need better leadership. There didn't seem to be a lot of leadership within that little tactical group there. And we need better tactics and a culture that values life on both sides of the badge. So even though if I was in that scenario and one of those officers, even though I would not agree with these ladies' stance, you still have to value the fact that they are they are human beings. So value life. And I think that's the conversation that a lot more people need to have. Anyway, this is all my opinion. I hope I've, my perspective looking at it from more of a policing point of view. There's obviously blame on both sides. Like I said, I just tend to look at it more from the blame, looking at it from a policing perspective and where they could have done better. But those officers were in a very dangerous situation, a hard situation to deal with in a split second, and unfortunately someone's life was taken. Please let me know what you think. These kinds of situations, unfortunately, are used by governments. I've talked about before, you have crisis, then you have control. They always want to implement new laws. bring in more controls upon society. Unfortunately, these kinds of situations are useful for that. This is my opinion. Please let me know what you think. I'm Jay Fallon, and thanks for listening.
They just fuel a desire that will take me higher.